I am so excited to announce that iDRIVEACLASSIC is now sponsored by Adrian Flux, one of the UK's leading classic car insurers. If you're looking for classic car insurance, I've popped a link to Adrian Flux in the description box below. Salut guys, it's Steph from iDRIVEACLASSIC, and today I'm back with this amazing Panhard Dyna X from 1953. It's the 20,000 subscriber special. Can't believe we're here, and I can't believe I'm finally driving this car that I've had on my hit list for, well, since the day Guy bought it, because I'm obsessed with it. I really want it. I love everything about it, and I cannot wait to show you it. So, let's go. As we test this Panhard Dyna X86, we not only get an appreciation for one of the most wonderfully interesting cars we've ever had on the channel, but of an era where car manufacturers around the world created cars which were completely different in a way that we just don't see in today's modern cars. Now, when I was researching this car, there wasn't a massive information online, so I was helped hugely by both Guy, the owner of the car, and an account on Twitter called Car Brochure Addict. You can follow them at addict_car, who gave me a copy of the brochure for this particular car to help with the video, which was very helpful. Now, the Dyna X was sold as a spacious family car, with the leading message that the available space in the car in its entirety was split to a ratio of 75% space for the driver and the passengers, 10% for the engine bay, and 15% for the luggage in the boot. And I'm sure you'll agree when you see inside, both front and back, that the car gives some of the larger cars on the market today a real run for the money legroom wise. Now, the design of the Dyna X wasn't as straightforward as some of the cars we've shown on the channel, and in fact the design was put forward by, apologies on pronunciation, Jean Albert Gregoire, who prided himself on not only building cars, but being a man who researched, assembled and developed prototypes. And with this, in 1940, he was tasked with, during the German occupation of France no less, to present a prototype of the future French car of the people. And with this, he considered in his typically forward-thinking way that the car would need to be economical in both construction and in use, meaning that it needed to be as light as possible. And with that, prototype AFG came to light, which stood for Aluminium Français Gregoire, the prototype being presented in 1942. The car was really different for the time and boasted a weight of 398 kilos, which was the body and the chassis. It had a fuel consumption of 4 litres for every 100 kilometres driven at an average speed of around 60 kilometres per hour, and it had a maximum speed of 90 kilometres per hour. Now, that might seem pretty junior today, but at the time it was brilliant. And this wasn't where the revolutionary thinking stopped, because the car design had the engine placed ahead of the front axle, which brought the weight forward, and with the modified layout of the clutch as well, it all meant that the car had less wasted space in the engine bay and more space where it counted, inside the car. Gregoire was keen to get the car to market, and he took the prototype to Citroën, Renault, Peugeot and Simca. The car was rejected by Citroën, Renault and Peugeot because they already had plans for their post-war cars, which were the 2CV, the Renault 4CV and the Peugeot 203. It was initially taken on by Simca for production, but due to complications which are worth researching after this video, the car never reached production. So this is where Panhard came in and badged the car as Dyna, but they did make a few key changes before bringing it to the market. And it's worth noting on that Panhard took this design because despite being rejected by 3 big automotive names, they had no car ready to launch to the post-war buying public, which would suit public mood, and as well as that, they had political considerations because by taking this design on, they then had almost a bit of favour and a bit of a kickback from the owners of the AFG prototype. Going back to the prototype modifications, one of the changes was taking the AFG from a 2 to a 4-door model, and this was because the French buying public at the time were just not keen on a 2-door model, and Panhard didn't think it would sell. And other changes included the redesigned grille and the headlight housing. But that wasn't where it stopped, because the twin cam engine design, which had been designed by Panhard as part of a project for military vehicles, was put into use, and it was put into the early Dynas. And the engine was mounted in front of the front axle, keeping that front wheel drive element. Now, there were other designs as well, including the differential housing being placed at the rear of the gearbox. Now, this might seem like a bit of a strange thing, but it did match how Panhard had done cars pre-war, so it wasn't a massive change. It did mean, however, with all these things going on, especially with the extra 2 doors, compared to the prototype from AFG, the final Dyna X design, the weight was increased by 38%. And Gregoire never actually liked it when it came out. He said, yes, I can see the AFG prototype within it, but he described the Dyna X as the AFG's sister, but with cellulite. And it's probably no wonder that he was a little bit funny, because Gregoire never actually got royalties on the AFG prototype, and he sued Panhard on it. And due to the design being taken to several companies, Panhard were able to wriggle out of paying anything, and there are photographs online of the trial showing Monsieur Panhard handing over a cheque for 1 franc. Ridiculous. The Dyna X series in total produced from 1948 until 1954, making this a later example from the Dyna X lineup. Now, of all Dyna X variants, there were just over 47,000 sold. The X86, as we're testing today, was made from 1950 to 1953 and was very much a learning from the earlier X84, which had preceded it, and it was intended for a very upmarket, well-to-do audience. Although, if you've ever watched Tintin, you'll probably know that the man himself had a Dyna X as well. And if you're looking at this car and thinking, well, it's very different to what we had in England, who would have purchased this new? Well, this was never actually sold new in England. So this X86 Sprint, which was top of the range, was actually sold new in Switzerland and has only ever had 4 owners, including the current owner, since new. So everyone's able to kind of trace it back. This particular model shows the 1950 facelift, where Panhard had added the chrome strips and a new grille, and this was put in to represent the twin cooling fans being replaced by a single one. And as well as that, from the X84, they increased the engine, so they took it up to 745cc, which was an increase of 28 brake horsepower. Eventually, the X86 was replaced by the X87. Now, before we catch up with the owner Guy, I just thought I'd tell you what he's got planned for this. He's got lots planned, but one of the most exciting things is he's taking this car on a big adventure next year, COVID willing, with Steve Berry, Philip Newsom and Jeff Marshall, and they're going to do it as per the Austin 16 7 Capital Cities in 7 Days trip that was held in 2017. But this time they're taking this incredible X86 from Paris to Helsinki. Now, I've spoken lots about this car and very excited about it because it's a rare beast indeed. But why did Guy pick it and what's he doing? Let's hand over to Guy and have a catch up with him.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Guy, voici ma Panhard Dyna de 1953. Cette voiture ici est pour Stéphanie. Elle a dit « Oh mon Dieu, c'est superbe, je t'adore votre petite voiture. » Et maintenant, nous make un film de la voiture. Hi, I'm Guy Loveridge. This is my 1953 Panhard Dyna X. This has had a very interesting life. Only 3 owners from new, which is quite astonishing. The first owner was a Swiss gentleman who was carried on driving into his 80s, died in his 90s, and this car then went to Holland and moved over to the UK 7 years ago. I've bought it because it's going to go from Paris to Helsinki in July next year for the centenary of a momentous occasion in Panhard's history. And in 1948, 3 Frenchmen spent their summer holidays doing the trip. and having done the Austin 16 Goodwill Tour in 2017, I thought, why not? We'll have a go.
Things are very different inside here to what you might have seen on some of the other 50s cars that you have perhaps driven yourself, or that you've seen on the channel or at car shows. So we're going to start over here and work our way over, and I'll try and explain everything for you. So over here we've got our advance and retard, so current is pointed at start. Now when we get going, we flip that round to run. Down here, this is the ignition button. You can see the light comes on there. W is for wipers. D is for debut, so we pull that when we start the car. And then over here you've got your temperature gauge, probably the most normal thing on this car actually. And then we go into an almost Art Deco-esque speedo in the centre of the car. In the middle we've got a speedo which is running in kilometres, but with helpful little markers in masking tape to tell us in miles per hour what we're actually doing. And they don't quite match because I don't think the speedo is quite running to correct kilometres, so they've just Guy and George have marked it out to get it right. And to our right we have got a clock, so well, enough going on, quite normal. But then weirdly, all the way over here we've got the choke and one ashtray. I thought the French were famous for smoking lots of cigarettes. I guess we're just going to have to rely on these rollback windows. Now things take a slightly weirder turn once we start looking at what we need to be using on the regular, because you've probably noticed that we didn't have anything for our indicators, for our lights, or a horn push. Well, guess what? It's all here. So we've got our horn, and then we've got our indicators, and then to put our lights on, we turn it. So it's probably no surprise that the Bakelite that this is made from has degraded quite a lot, because it's obviously having a lot of contact. Now that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the dash, but let's talk about changing gear, because you've probably noticed as well when we looked at the walk around that things aren't all as they seem. And I should probably also mention that this Dyna pull is actually our handbrake. This car is nuts. Now going back to changing gear, it's all the way down here, so it's on an H shape. So to change that gear, as always, probably the only normal thing that we're going to do here is put our foot down on that clutch. Now to get it into first, we pull it up, we go down for second, we come across, we go up for third, we go down for fourth, and to get it into reverse, and I've not managed to get this right once yet, it's come right across and we kind of come up. I already know that I'm going to be struggling when we drive this. So let's start her up, because I want you to hear how she sounds. It's quite agricultural, but honestly, she's really grown on me. I've only been in her presence today for about 30 minutes, and I want to get her started up so you can hear how she sounds. Now, getting this started up is a little bit different. We're going to push the ignition in first. So remember, this needs to point to start. So we push that in, check that lights come on, and then we need to pull debut. So takes quite a bit, and then we flip that round to run, and I'll let you hear what she sounds like from the back. Now this Panhard wouldn't be for everyone. It's kind of slow because we have only got 747.5 cc under the bonnet, and it's kind of rattly and it's a bit cold, but it's got more charm than probably the last 10 or 15 vehicles that I've taken out together, because everything from this mad netting that you could chuck a baguette into or some onions, to the paintwork and the patina on the outside and its life story. This car has what it lacks in refinement: character. Now, although it is a bit rattly and it's kind of slow, what I like about it is the handling is a lot sharper than I expected. I thought that it would be all over the road, but actually, as you can see, we don't really have to turn the steering wheel that much for it to start behaving. Now, I will be honest, I am really struggling with these gear changes because, of course, we've got this H box, but it's not got any synchro on any gear. And in fact, it says in the owner's handbook, take a small pause before selecting your gears. But honestly, even when I take a small pause, I'm still really struggling to get it right. Now, you're probably wondering how many of these delightful Panhards are left. Well, in the UK, of course, there aren't really very many. I think it's less than 10. But of course, on the continent and mainland Europe, there are far more. But even so, it's still a bit of an endangered species. Although bizarrely, there are actually 2 in West Yorkshire. I think one of the things that I really like about French cars is every time you take a French car out, you feel like the car manufacturer has challenged what normal looks like. And I feel like you really feel it in this as well, because it does not only looks absolutely bonkers, but some of the stuff that's going on inside as well is just a bit crazy. And I think one of the things that people always say is that the French are stylish, and when you get into this, you do feel like it is a stylish car, from that Art Deco design here with the Bakelite through to the handbrake that's got Dyna printed on it. Just, I don't know, just everything about this is just really nice. Now, when I got into it, I really hoped it was going to be easier to drive, because whilst this is one of my favourite test drives in terms of how bonkers it is, it's not one of my favourite test drives in terms of actually driving the thing, because that gear stick and the gearbox is really holding me back, and I think you would have to be a really accomplished driver to get it right, because it is difficult. Now, I've driven a lot of stuff, a lot of strange stuff, and a lot of stuff with weird gearboxes, and even this has got me flummoxed. So whilst I have no problem sitting this side of the car, and usually I do when I test left-hand drive cars, that gearbox is really taking away from the pleasure for me. We're still getting up these hills pretty well, and it's holding the road quite well as we go around corners. So I think if you could get your head around that gearbox, which I really can't, I'm really struggling with it, this could be a car that you could keep for life, because it's certainly fun from the outside and it's fun to be in. Like, you've got these bench seats and no seat belts. You can essentially fit in as many people as you want. Depends how skinny your friends are. If you bring in me, probably myself and 2 others on the back, if being generous. But even though that gearbox has held me back and I've struggled with it a bit and I've really had to grapple every time I've changed gear, I've still really loved it. It's like when you fall in love with someone that is covered in red flags. That's this car for me. When I bought a Morris Minor, I couldn't drive that either. I really struggled with that. So I think it is a case of getting to grips with the car. It's just maybe not as easy as some of the other stuff that I've test driven. So whether this is your first iDrive a Classic video or you're a hardened subscriber who watches the videos every week, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for watching, because you guys have not only allowed me to build up a channel that I'm really proud of, but you've given my life a bit of purpose as well, because before I drive a Classic, I'm actually not really sure what I used to do with my time. I certainly wasn't having as much fun as I am now. So wherever you are in the world and tuning in from, whether you've just watched this video out of curiosity or you watch every week, thank you so much, because I love doing iDrive a Classic and I love sharing the adventures with you, and long may it continue. So I guess it leaves me to say, until next time, take care and drive safely.